All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Inside Analysis. And next up, we're going to talk about LangGrant. You've heard about LangChain. We're going to talk about LangGrant, where you're giving people access to your databases based upon data plans. And it's a very interesting approach they're taking about trying to standardize reasoning and recognize that if you have 150 employees all doing their own prompts and getting their own answers back, well, there is some value to that, but there would be greater value if there was a sort of standard layer that captures all this, especially with respect to data plans, like trying to get some answer from your information systems using the models as part of that workflow. This is very interesting stuff. So Ramesh is working with LangGrant, and you're providing this extra layer, which is saving tokens, first of all, but it's also standardizing an approach to reasoning, and you're allowing the organization to reuse the plans that have already been made. So I think this is a very clever way of exposing, first of all, this new powerful tool, these models connected to your databases, so your real information assets of your organization, and doing so in a way that optimizes the query plans, the results that you get, and thus the clarity of answers that you get in return, right?
Absolutely. I think well, you might consider evangelizing our technology and changing your profession.
Yeah,
But
there you go.
on a more serious note, yeah, I think you got that right. I think the main premise we're trying to convey to people is that as your teams work with databases, trying to get answers or results or analytics from them, today the AI is learning, but your organization is not learning at all.
Hmm.
And the way we solve this problem of your organization not learning anything is by taking every interaction with the AI around your databases. So, for example, you might ask a question, tell me, which customers are contributing to gross margins about 30%. And then and then what happens is that that data lives in a couple of databases, Salesforce, maybe Oracle, maybe a costing system in Oracle. What our product does, what LangGrant does, is it turns every question or every problem your individuals, your teams ask into a data plan.
Hmm.
What does that mean? What is a data plan? A data plan essentially is the blueprint. It's the playbook. How is that problem being answered?
Hmm.
So in this case, in this particular example, the data plan would contain which databases were of relevance to get that question answered, which tables and which columns were of interest. How did you join the tables? Say, how did you join a customer table in Salesforce, an accounts table in Salesforce with a cost or an object table from Oracle?
Hmm.
And then after that, what definitions did you use for gross margin? And was there a definition already existing in the LangGrant system, or did a new one have to be created? And then what sort of filters, what was the logic used to create the answer and the
Hmm.
results?
Hmm.
Now, LangGrant takes this whole blueprint, which we call the data plan, and it saves it. And it saves it in a very structured format. In some sense, you can think of this as a reasoning asset. The whole
Hmm.
reasoning has been captured in a structure and
Hmm.
saved. Why is the structure important? It's important because that's the only way that humans and the software tools they use can actually parse that reasoning and contribute to it.
Hmm.
So we're trying to move the thinking from only AI does the reasoning to AI along with the teams and software tools in the organization together do the reasoning. And so when
Hmm.
they do it together, it's easier to collaborate, you save it, and then your organization is now learning from it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And what there are a couple different interesting things about this. One of which is capturing not just the return or the result set that you kind of read yourself and then move on to other things, but capturing the logic. And you're then
Right.
seeing how the model interacted with your. So here's a question for you. MCP.
Right.
Are you essentially an MCP, or are you sitting on top of or adjacent to an MCP, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we use MCP. So we're a consumer of MCP,
Okay.
and our interaction with the model is primarily via MCP. So
Okay.
LangGrant includes an agent in itself, but LangGrant is also a server. So if you already have an agentic client and architecture, you can simply use the MCP server that LangGrant provides. So
Hmm.
LangGrant is like MCP plus a whole lot of other things to make sure that your organization is learning.
Yeah, that's very cool because it's that point of intersection that's very interesting
Right.
because now you what you're doing is you're using the model for what it's good at, which is pattern analysis and stochastic discovery,
That's right.
basically.
That's right.
And this is very cool because you think about it historically, you would have a query optimizer that would do this
Yes.
kind of thing, right?
That's
But
right.
it's kind of a black box, right? It's
Yeah.
inside of
Yeah.
Alteryx or it's inside of Teradata or wherever it is, and it takes
That's
a lot
right.
of time to build those things and to get them to
Right.
be efficient. But
Right.
now you're adding another layer on top of that to
Right.
leverage the power of an LLM and then capture that structured reasoning such that
Right.
it could be repurposed and even augmented by humans, right?
That's right. That's right. Because and the reason why that's important to augment that reasoning with human intelligence is that there's so many things about your organization that you simply cannot just give as context to the LLM and forget about it.
Hmm.
The human judgment. So if you believe that human judgment counts in order to produce better decision intelligence for the
Right.
org, then this is almost a must-have.
Right. Yeah, that's very cool stuff. And the human also learns over time, right? And to a certain
Absolutely.
extent, depending upon how you structure things,
Right.
one of the cool things about these LLMs is that they are capturing everything.
Right.
And I say hats off to Google. I mean, I think Claude now is the probably the top model.
Right.
ChatGPT is probably in second. Gemini is
Yep.
probably in third. But one very cool thing Gemini did was focus on enabling at Drive and at
Yep.
Gmail to
Right.
leverage your vectorized data
Yep.
estate.
The
And
states.
it's
Yep.
like now you're connecting all, I mean, really, it's a turbo powered search, is what it
Yeah.
boils down to, but it's search across applications and files and different things
That's
to
right.
give you a holistic view of something, right? And now
Yeah.
with LangGrant, and by the way,
Right.
it's langgrant.com, folks, look this up online. With LangGrant, you're really taking that one step further by giving this nice window into the reasoning that the model suggests,
Right.
persisting that,
Right.
and then down the road, the user just goes in and says, "Hey, I want to understand XYZ."
Right.
And your technology will go look around and say, "Hey, we actually already did this." I mean, this is
That's right.
one of the
Yeah.
biggest challenges in the IT world is reinventing wheels. We reinvent
That's right.
wheels all day long, right? There's
Yeah.
constantly reinventing wheels. And then you have,
Yeah.
in the days of like all of thousands of dashboards, you
Right.
reinvent that dashboard 568 times because no one
Right.
knew there was already one to do that, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Which
So
is
yeah.
a
So that's absolutely. I think the you got a industrial revolution analogy of the wheel, right? That's where the
right.
wheel came about. And
That's
given
right.
that AI is the new industrial revolution,
Right.
the analogy is don't reinvent your reasoning. That's the
Right.
new analogy. And then the
Well,
reasoning stays, and because of that, people underestimate the amount of stuff that AI is going to throw at you. Imagine like a million questions being asked in your organization.
right.
That all that reasoning has to be captured somewhere. And if you're going to have your humans work with it, you're going to need software tools to understand the reasoning, which
Right.
means you're going to have to structure it. There's no way
Right.
around.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think that a lot of people don't fully appreciate the inefficiency of models for
That's
certain
right.
problems, right? What you're
Totally.
trying to do is use the model for what it's good at and then
That's
use
right.
your enterprise data for what it's good at, which is preserving
Exactly.
records of what's going on in your company. These are two very
Absolutely.
different worlds, right? It's
Absolutely.
and so when you have the MCP and you're using the MCP to
Right.
determine what
Right.
calls did it make, because that's the other thing
Right.
is you're enabling a nice crisp audit trail of
That's
how
right.
you got the answers, right?
That's right. Yeah, the audit trail is actually a nice side benefit because all of the reasoning has been persisted. Imagine somebody who's signing on a government document saying, "Yep, this is the SEC 10K,"
Right.
and today you're going to have to just assume that your team's delivered the right one. Now you
Right.
can look it up and say, "Look, this
Wow.
was the reasoning," and I'm pretty
Wow.
confident. So you can be a lot more confident when you sign on the dotted line, which could impact your life.
Wow. Well, and you're also, I think, filling in what was a blank in is like sort of a null value, if you will, in the architecture,
Right.
because we know that LLMs are probabilistic in nature by
That's
design,
right.
like, and they always
That's right.
will be, at least with
Yeah.
this current architecture, which
Yep.
means you always will have gaps, right? Wherever you have a low
Right.
distribution area, it's going
Right.
to manufacture something. And so if you can now have visibility
Right.
into the logic path, the data
Right.
plan, as you call
Right.
it, that's
Yep.
very powerful. So you're solving for the one big Achilles heel right now of using LLMs for analytics in your business, and that is
That's
the
right.
hallucinations, right?
Right. Yeah. And we're getting, it is an Achilles heel, and people really respond well to the notion that, oh, yeah, I finally understand very clearly what were the steps involved.
Hmm.
Now, one can say, look, you can always ask the agent to give you back a big chat on what the steps were. The problem is then it's much harder to collaborate with chats. Software tools cannot understand them. Ironically,
Interesting.
the model companies, what they're doing is they're persisting chats, right? That's been happening for a while now.
Right.
And so their solution to the problems of AI is to use more AI with the persistent chats.
Right.
So
That's right. Right. When you get error propagation and you get
that's right.
into a fun space I like to examine, which is the 80/20 rule, right? Everyone knows the Pareto principle, 80/20 rule. It's amazing how many things distill down to 80/20, but it's
Right.
also there are other ones like 64/36,
Yeah.
right? Which is 80.8 times point 0.8 is 0.64,
Yep.
right? And point 0.2 times point 0.2
Persist.
is
Yeah.
0.04, right?
And
And so
multiply it.
like
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
get deeper into these things to understand what's actually happening and
Right.
you're providing a window to do that. And it's a very powerful connection. I would say it sounds like the linchpin that's holding these two worlds together. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that fortunately for us, the what you call the linchpin is what the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, is calling the learning loop.
Interesting.
Satya's recent comments on his essays were around, what do you do? The model is really not where your organization should perceive its value.
Right.
Instead, it's the learning loop of the software, tools, and the humans who
Hmm.
contribute to the reasoning and the learnings of the model
Hmm.
and make that. And that is what your organization's competitive advantage should be.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
pretty encouraged. We were pretty encouraged when we saw that because a good validation of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So you call it what it is, learning loop, structured reasoning. Structured reasoning essentially enables Satya Nadella's learning loop concept.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, what's exciting for me, because I'm a data and analytics guy. So I've been
Right.
studying this stuff for, I'm afraid to
Okay.
admit how
Right.
long, data warehousing. But it's like you look at data warehousing, and I came up with an analogy recently. In a lot of
Right.
ways, it's like scaffolding, right? So you
Yeah.
build all this scaffolding so you can get way up in the building and look through this window and see this
That's right.
information. But
Yeah.
now with some of these models, you don't need as much scaffolding, I guess is one way to look at it. If you have the data plans, if you've done the work to kind of identify how to
Right.
come up with this number, that's a
Right.
very interesting approach as just a pure SQL query on structured data, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're adding another layer that is bringing in more context and is also clarifying to a point that can be audited and understood by humans and machines, right?
That's right. Absolutely. I think that imagine you asked a question that required you to send the schema of like four databases to the model. And
Hmm.
then the next time around, there's a similar question. You really want to be sending all of that context, like 100,000, like 500,000 tokens,
Right,
when you already have the AI has already figured out that problem, a similar problem. So
right.
the next time around, you simply make the delta. You just pay just for the delta tokens.
Right. That's right. Which is, I mean, and that is the hidden cost, right? Or not so
Right.
hidden cost that, that
Right.
everyone's
It's
encountering.
not so hidden anymore. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and it's we're in such a strange time now. It's very exciting, but I've said on other shows too, and I'm sure you'll agree with this that the dynamic has changed dramatically in large part because of Claude Code and because of the
Right.
coding assistants that you can use now. Because
Right.
for the last 40 years, you could argue that developers have been the bottleneck.
Yep.
And it's like all the pressure's on them. Okay, the business
Yep.
wants X. You guys get
Yep.
to work on it. Okay, and you're cranking away for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 14 weeks or something. And
Yep.
okay, here's something. Well, now you can collapse that cycle time down to a day or two
That's
days.
right.
And so
That's right.
now it's on the business to
Yeah.
figure out what it wants and to better understand what it's doing. And that's where LangGrant also comes into play, right?
Absolutely. In fact, we're very aligned with the business simply because we enable the business, the teams on the business side to contribute to the solution of the problems or the answer to the questions that they have. So
Mm-hmm.
a business user can actually participate in a very meaningful manner in the reasoning to get some answers from the database on the example I gave you, for
Right,
example, on gross margin. In the
right,
past, the business teams simply had to wait. They had to wait for the data
right,
engineering team and they
right.
had to accept whatever they said. Now they
That's
don't. Now
interesting.
they can actually see it for themselves.
Wow. See, and I love that because now you're educating the business
Right.
and they can ask better questions then and move on to the next step, which is,
Yeah.
asking a deeper question or a more focused question or, getting a better understanding of how these things work. Because when you know how, I mean, my general impression is that when you know how things work, it's a very comforting aspect and it
Yeah.
it enables you to ask bigger questions, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise you're too trepidatious to try
Yeah.
because you're not sure. There's an opportunity cost, basically, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, totally. And then, a lot of time it's also demotivation. If you don't have the
Right.
ability
That's
or
right.
transparency, right? I mean, you get demotivated.
That's right. Well, listen, look this gentleman up online. LangGrant.com is the solution. I'm sure you'll be hearing more of them. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.